The Utah Utes have made back-to-back Rose Bowl games, and even though the Rose Bowl is going to be part of the four-team college football playoff this season, the Utes still have their sights set on making a New Year's Six bowl game. However, there is some uncertainty about their starting quarterback, whether or not he'll be ready to go for the time, in time, I should say, to start the season. And there's some overturn on the defensive side of the ball. Can the Utah Utes fight their way back to a New Year's Six bowl game? Maybe even break into the college football playoff, or will the Utes start to take some steps back under Kyle Whittingham? What's up, Tailgaters? My name is Tailgate Nate. Welcome to my channel. I'm predicting all 133 college football FBS level teams this summer, which means I'm doing your favorite team, which means you guys should hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so you know when that video gets uploaded. But you can do more things than that to help me support my channel. You're doing one right now by watching the video, and you can do more by liking, commenting, subscribing, and really anything else to help support me if you would like to do so. Let's talk about the Utah Utes entering 2023. Have not been able to break through and win that Rose Bowl yet, but they have made the Rose Bowl in back-to-back years, and again, with the Rose Bowl being part of the playoff, looking for another New Year's Six bowl game appearance. Hey, how do preview predictions work this season? Glad you asked. We take a look at a roster overview, take a look at who the team lost, who's coming back, and who's coming in through the transfer portal and their recruiting class, as well as taking a look at the 2023 Utes football schedule and giving it good old-fashioned game-by-game preview and prediction. So without further ado, let's go ahead and preview and predict Utah here in 2023 as you take a look at your roster. Now, I mentioned there was a little bit of uncertainty about your starting quarterback. However, you do return Cameron Rising, 3,034 yards on 64.7% completion percentage with 26 touchdowns and 8 interceptions last season. Also did have 465 rushing yards and 6 touchdowns. He is coming off of knee surgery, and it is still uncertain whether or not he'll be ready to go before the start of the 2023 season. However, there is a lot of certainty that he will be the starter. However, if not Cameron Rising, you got guys like Bryson Barnes, who has had some playing experience last year and years prior, and then Brandon Rose back there as well if Cam Rising is not fully healthy, 100% ready to go to start 2023. In the running back room, you do lose your leading rusher, Tavian Thomas, but he was kind of fallen back out of that leading role as last season went along. If I do remember that correctly, Utah fans, feel free to correct me in the comment section below. But 142 carries, apologies for the stutter, 687 yards and 7 touchdowns last season, was of course your leading rusher. You do return Micah Bernard with 533 yards and 4 touchdowns last season, as well as some really good pieces like Jaquindon Jackson, who led the team with 9 touchdowns and was just slightly behind Micah Bernard with 531 rushing yards, and Jalen Glover among some other names in the running back room that could be pretty good for the Utes this season. That's a fairly deep running back room there for the Utes with Bernard, Jackson, and Glover. Again, some other names. In the wide receiver room, you do lose Jalen Dixon. Did rush the football 10 times, had 118 rush yards and 4 rushing touchdowns, but in terms of receiving, was your third leading receiver among wide receivers, 344 yards and 3 touchdowns last season. You do return your top 2 receivers among wide receivers, of course, in Devon Vele and Money Parks. Vele 695 yards, 5 touchdowns, and Parks 414 yards and 2 touchdowns. And you're getting some transfers coming over to help bolster up this wide receiver room, and some pretty solid ones at that. Micah Pittman's coming over from Florida State, and Emery Simmons comes over by way of Indiana. So some pretty good transfers to bolster that wide receiver room there. And when you look at the tight end room, there is a big loss here in Dalton Kincaid. Was the best tight end duo in the nation last year. Still could be again, but you do lose a big piece of that in Dalton Kincaid. 890 yards and 8 touchdowns. Led the team in receptions as well with 70, as well as yards and touchdowns, as I said earlier. You do return a nice piece, though, in Brant Keithy. If I remember correctly, he was battling some injuries last year as well. He'll be a really good piece and will be that starting tight end. And then Thomas Yasmin is back there as well. Still a phenomenal piece at the tight end position to work with for the Utah Utes. So still could be one of the best tight end duos in the entire country. But when you have an experienced quarterback like Cam Rising, as long as he's back and healthy and ready to go, he's done it before. He's battled back from injuries before in his career. This should be a pretty solid Utah offense, led by an offensive line that does lose Braden Daniels and Paul Melee, but returns Keaton Bills, Seteoa. Apologies for mispronunciations across the board. Seteoa Laumea and Michael Mokofisi are going to be returning for that offensive line. Defensively, what have we got to look forward to for the Utah Utes? Well, Gabe Reed is gone off that defensive line. had 39 tackles, and led the team with 5.5 sacks last season. However, there are a lot of guys that got a lot of sacks for this defense last year. Connor O'Toole is one of them, had a sack and a half. Junior Tafuna had a sack last season. Samote Pepa had 4 sacks. I believe that is third on the team last year, or tied for third or something like that. And then Jonah Ellis had 3 sacks last year for this defense, or for this defensive line, I should say. When you look at the linebacking group, you do lose Mohamed Diabate, who had 5 sacks last year, was one of your big pieces on the linebacking group, and a little bit of a depth piece, and Andrew Mataafa, who's going to be gone as well. But when you take a look at what you return in the linebacking room, Kareem Reed was your third leading tackler with 72 tackles, and was tied for second on the team with Diabate with those 5 sacks. Oh, and someone I forgot to mention on the defensive line is Fillinger, who had 5 sacks last year as well, but of course not on the board. But also in the linebacker room, Lander Barton and Hayden Fury, my apologies, again, mispronunciations, are going to be coming back. In the defensive back room, you have to return a world-class talent in Clark Phillips. 6 passes defended, 6 interceptions, including 2 pick sixes, and RJ Hubert was the second leading tackler for this team and was second on the team as well in interceptions. However, there are some nice pieces in this secondary. Your leading tackler from last season, Cole Bishop, comes back, as well as guys by the name of Travis Brutton, Sion Vaki, and Zamaya Vaughn. So there are going to be some good pieces to this defense. I think it's still going to be a very physical defense. And the offense, well, we'll see how healthy Cam Rising is to start 2023. Your head coach is Kyle Whittingham, of course, led by offensive coordinator Andy Ludwig and defensive coordinator Morgan Scalley, as we take a look at the Utah Utes 2023 football schedule. Hey, if you don't know how this works by now, well, let me break it down. Any game that's going to be underlined is a home game. Any game that you see in italics of the slanted text is a game the Utes will play on the road. Any game in green is a game I think the Utes win easily. Any game in yellow is, hey, okay, the other team's going to fight, but Utah will win. And then red is a loss. So let's preview and predict Utah's football schedule in 2023. And a round of applause for the Utah Utes out of conference scheduling this year, because they did not make it easy on themselves at all. You got to go play a Florida Gators team that I think is going to be fairly competitive this year. However, if you've watched some of my SEC predictions, you'll know that I'm just not super confident in what the Florida Gators have under Billy Napier this season. Now, I do think Napier is the right guy for the job, and I think he just needs some more time to build Florida. They've got a hard schedule over there, and just take a look at next year. But talking about this year, this is the game that was pretty good last year, pretty fun to watch. Anthony Richardson kind of took over, and I don't know that Florida kind of has that guy that's going to be able to take over this game like Anthony Richardson did last year. I think Utah, even if Cam Rising is not 100% with the physicality and toughness that they possess, I think they will win their season opener over the Florida Gators. However, I do think they are going to lose one of these 2 games here, the second one being against Baylor, and I do see Baylor, maybe at this point you consider this an upset here if Baylor pulls this win off. Probably end up being an upset, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. But I do believe that Baylor is going to be able to pull this win off. They do have Blake Shapen coming back, and again, especially if Cam Rising is not 100% ready to go, they're going to miss that experience at the quarterback position a lot, especially if a guy like Barnes or Rose is going to have to come in and play some quarterback in that game. Baylor does lose some pieces on defense, but I think they have enough to be able to hang with the Utes, and I think offensively they can put up points on this Utah defense as well. So Baylor hands Utah their first loss of 2023, but Utah should be bouncing back nicely with a win over Weber State. And then is the game against UCLA. Now, UCLA, a very interesting team this season. They are going to have a new quarterback, try to replace Dorian Thompson-Robinson. However, there are a lot of very talented quarterbacks in that room, and really any one of them that gets the start should be a solid option for that team. Some, of course, better than others. But when you take a look at this defense and some of the offensive pieces, I think they got some really good talent. I think their last season in the Pac-12 is going to be a very, very competitive one. But with Utah getting this win at home, I expect by this point, Cam Rising probably should be fully healthy, should be able to get ready to go off of that knee surgery. And I think Utah's going to be able to win a close one against the UCLA Bruins. Then you got to go on the road and play the Oregon State Beavers. Now, I love what Oregon State has got there. DJ Uiagalelei going to come in and be that quarterback. I love that running back in Damian Martinez. I think he is phenomenal. I think he will be again in 2023. Oregon State does lose some pieces here and there, but don't sleep on the Beavers this year. That's going to be a very, very good football team. However, I do see Utah being a little too physical for this Oregon State team to handle, and Utah, I do believe, will edge out Oregon State at the end of the day. I think that's going to be a very close back-and-forth game. You're not going to want to miss watching that one. I believe it's on a Friday night there, but Utah, I do think, will go on the road, be able to get that win over the Oregon State Beavers. And then comes your bye week. You've had a lot of tough games under your belt, and then you have to go play Cal. I think Cal's going to be a pretty solid team this year. I think they got a lot of very nice talent. I just think the problem with Cal this year is they're in a very deep and a very competitive conference. So Cal, definitely a team that can keep some games interesting that maybe they, quote, aren't supposed to. But Cal is a team that I see Utah being able to pull away from late, although I can see Cal making that game competitive. On the road at USC. USC going to be a very, very good football team this year. Yes, we all know the defense does need some work, but this offense is elite. It's one of a kind. You got one of the best offensive minds in college football in Lincoln Riley. USC will be spectacular. And the part of the reason I think they are going to beat the Utah Utes is that passing attack, right? With Caleb Williams and company, I think losing Clark Phillips and the other player whose name is escaping my mind right now, RJ Hubert. That was it. With losing those two guys in the secondary, I don't think Utah's going to have quite enough to keep up with the USC passing attack. Now, they may have a little trouble against this Utah defense, especially in the front seven, but overall, I see USC being able to score enough points on this Utah team to be able to win that game. Then you get the game against Oregon. Kyle Whittingham has dealt with opponents like this in the past. Oregon's going to be a very, very good team this year. They return Bo Nix, even though they do have a new offensive coordinator. They got a lot of returning pieces on the offensive side. And yeah, that defense, while it has got to get better, they loaded up on transfers on the defensive side of the football. However, I just think Utah, again, and Kyle Whittingham knows how to win games like this. This is going to be a big-time moment for Utah. It's going to be a very nice bounce-back game after that loss to USC. And I think the Utes are going to hand Oregon a loss there. Arizona State, I'll keep this one short and simple. I think the Utes are going to be able to pretty easily beat Arizona State. Kenny Dillingham, again, former Oregon offensive coordinator, is that coach there. And I think it's going to take some time for him to really get that program rolling, bring in a lot of very talented transfers. I just don't know that it translates in year one for Kenny Dillingham. So the Utes going to be able to win that one there. And then Washington on the road. Look, this Huskies team, much same story as USC. They're going to have a very dangerous passing attack. Michael Penix is one of the best quarterbacks in the nation. They got one of the best wide receiver rooms in the entire country. Their running back room is really good. And if that defense, especially in the front seven, can stay healthy, watch out for Washington this year. That's going to be a very dangerous team. Utah, I believe, will lose that game on the road. However, I do believe they will win out from here. Arizona on the road is going to be tricky. I love what Jed Fish has been able to do with that program. And Arizona with Jaden DeLora at quarterback, don't be surprised if this game, much like the Oregon State game, maybe sneaks up on Utah here, as Arizona can be very competitive. They are going to be a very tough team to play this year. However, I do see Utah being able to pull away with a win on the road against what I think is going to be a very, very tough Arizona team to play. And then Colorado. I think Colorado is going to be very competitive this year. You cannot overlook what Deion Sanders has done. He's basically flipped Boulder on its head. There's an entire new roster in town. However, and again, I'm of the mind that I think Deion's going to start winning very, very quickly. I just don't know that it's going to be in year one. Maybe year two when a lot of these players get a year under the system, but Colorado is definitely a dark horse team in the Pac-12 conference. I see that game being close, but Utah pulling away, which leads me to a 9-3 record prediction for the Utah Utes. Now, if Cam Rising can avoid injury and stay healthy, this can be a much better team. This can be an 11-win team. But early in the year when Cam Rising's trying to figure things out, I do think they drop a game there. And it's the reality of playing in the Pac-12 this year. You got a lot of very, very tough teams on your schedule that you're going to have to deal with. So 9-3 is what I'm going with for the Utes. And that's going to do it for my prediction for the Utah Utes. Hey, please tell me what you think on the Utes in the comment section below. And remember to play hard, but tailgate harder. See all you guys in the next one. Goodbye.